Good morning and welcome to Coalesce London. Thank you for joining us and I'm so happy to be here with you. My name is Roisin Carney. I'm a Senior Partner Manager in EMEA and I'm delighted to be your EMC for this morning's session, getting to kick off today's event with you. This time last year, I was 3 weeks into my journey here at DBT and it's incredible to see, especially the size of this room, and there's a lot of faces looking at me, to see how far we've come. We've a packed day ahead of us and you will hear from DBT users, community members, and our very own DBT Labs team members. Now, before we get started, a couple of quick housekeeping notes. Please remember to put your phones on silent. We don't want to be that one person where your phone rings. If you have any questions, please stop by the registration desk or ask someone in a lovely purple Coalesce t-shirt. They are here to help. Take this time to download our events app. This is where you'll see our latest agenda, receive notifications, and after today, you will be able to live stream our event in San Diego. None of this would be possible without our amazing partners, so thank you. And one more thing before we go. You are about to get a sneak peek at several product enhancements from DBT Labs, both on our keynote stage and our breakout sessions. You'll hear it here first, 8 hours ahead of San Diego. So we please ask, do not share on LinkedIn, social media, and also community Slack channels until the official launch tonight at 6:30 p.m. Thank you again for being with us here. And now, with no further ado, I'm here to kick off Coalesce London is our Vice President of Engineering, Heidi Brandenburg.
Welcome to Coalesce 2023. It is so good to have all of you here. Who is here for the first time today? Can you raise your hands? Oh, look at that. All right, put them down. I am also here for the first time today. It is my first time in London. It is my first in-person Coalesce, and I am so happy to spend this time with you. So if you're coming for the first time today, my hope is that today feels a little bit different than your typical industry conference. Coalesce is more dress down than dress up. It is more meetup than industry conference. It is that place where we take our online relationships into real life. So if you're a newbie like me, my goal for you today is to spend so much time laughing and smiling that at the end of the day, your face is all hurt. So who was here last year? Can you raise your hands? All right, we've got a few. Well, welcome back. My challenge to all of you who were here last year is to help us weave more community today. So say hello to your neighbor. Make an introduction to someone who has solved a similar problem. Share a little piece of your story. I love this community. I came to DBT Labs because of all of you and the opportunity to make a difference in your lives. There is a lot of software out there, a lot of industry conferences, but there is no space quite like this. So thank you for everything you do to make it magic. Okay, so this morning I want to attempt to answer the 4 most important questions for any community. Why are we here? Where have we been? Where are we now? And where are we going? We're here because we believe data is powerful. We care about everyone in an organization being able to use it. DBT isn't about empowering an elite few. We believe that all data practitioners are fully capable of building mature production systems that create and share knowledge. We also believe that data practitioners have a lot to learn from software development. DBT brings mature practices pioneered in software engineering, source control, automated testing, CI and CD into data in a way that was all too rare in 2016. When our co-founders, Tristan, Drew, and Connor, built the first versions of DBT, they imbued it with these beliefs. In the 7 years since then, we have all been on quite a ride. Here's where that journey has brought us. Today, there are 30,000 organizations using DBT in production weekly. We have become a truly global community spanning 27 countries. And in September of this year, DBT executed 1.1 billion model invocations. So if you added up all the execution time in September alone, it's 653 years. That's a lot of transformation. The initial ideas baked into DBT are ideas that resonated with many, many of you. Organizations in every industry and every size and shape use DBT in production. In a way our co-founders never could have anticipated, DBT has shaped what it means to do data work today. There is, of course, a lot left to do. We'll talk about that a little bit later. First, I'm going to spend a few minutes talking about the journey that we, DBT Labs, have been on for the past few years. So the first 3.5 years, our founders built the initial product. They ran a modern data stack consultancy known as Fishtown Analytics. And they learned a new way of working alongside all of you. Eventually, they raised venture capital. The community had gotten so big that Tristan, Drew, and Connor couldn't continue to support it as a tiny little consulting business. After taking the venture investment, we ramped the team, especially engineering. We grew from 5 to 50 to 100 engineers over the course of the next 3 years. About 1.5 years ago is when I joined DBT Labs. And as the engineering team grew, we matured the platform. DBT Core became more performant, more consistent, more well-documented. DBT Cloud was hardened with investments in infrastructure, scaling, identity and auth, APIs, RBAC, audit logging. With these investments, DBT, always a great choice for data teams at small companies, was increasingly the choice of the Global 2000. So over the course of this journey, our business has grown fast, which is fantastic. But honestly, things have changed so quickly, we have not done a good job of telling you what we, as a company, are trying to do. So I want to take a few minutes now to do that. There are 3 things that DBT Labs is focused on today: sustainability and stewardship, open source and open standards, and cloud innovation. First, our goal is to build DBT Labs into a long-term, sustainable business. This means we have to grow. And in order to grow, we have to become profitable. I care about this because it is the only way we can continue to steward the DBT community over the very long term. We believe we are still in the early days of the DBT journey. If you're here, it's because you've seen the dramatic change that typing DBT run can make on your career. There are orders of magnitude more humans who haven't yet typed those 6 letters. Second, open source. We care about open source. We care about open source as a way to drive standardization. DBT has become the standard for data transformation across the modern data stack, and the benefits of this for the entire ecosystem are huge. It's easier to hire people with the right skills. Most of the modern tooling in the data stack integrates directly with DBT. And there are tons of community-maintained libraries for working with DBT. Whatever problem you run into, someone has already solved it. The DBT standard is powered by open source software. DBT Labs remains committed to the Apache 2.0 license. DBT Core will continue to be Apache 2.0 licensed, and we will continue to invest real dollars in maintaining and improving it for the benefit of everyone in the DBT community. This is what it takes to build a standard that makes every one of us stronger. Third, cloud innovation. I want DBT Cloud to be the best way to write, run, and operate DBT. As an industry, we have now seen 3 decades of commercial open source. There are some problems that open source solves well, and there are some problems it does not. I'm excited to innovate in cloud, to create a more seamless experience for all DBT developers, making you far more efficient, to create products that allow you to understand the state of your data, to enable teams to scale DBT to hundreds and thousands of developers, to provide SLAs and operational maturity that simply do not exist in data engineering today. All of this requires more than open source software. It requires cloud infrastructure and best-in-class usability. As we build towards the future of DBT, these are the types of problems that we are focused on solving with DBT Cloud. So to summarize, sustainability and stewardship, open source and open standards, cloud innovation. We can't do any of these things without the others. We must do them all. And in order to be successful, we must do them working hand in hand with you, our customers, our partners, the DBT community. Okay, so we've zoomed way, way out. Let's zoom back in. Let's talk about our big unifying theme for this year. Complexity. So here's a Tristan story. Tristan is our co-founder and CEO. About a year ago, he wanted to make a change in our internal analytics project. It had been some time since he had worked in the project, so he did the things that you do. He pulled the recent code. He ran a DBT build. Whoa, the first thing he noticed, our internal analytics project is now over 1,000 models. The second thing, getting up and running with this new larger code base was hard. There were model failures. It took a long time to build from scratch. In a lot of ways, this experience in the larger project was the exact opposite of how DBT had started out. It was slow, ungainly, unpleasant. And it turned out that Tristan wasn't alone in having this experience. As our product and field teams spoke to some of our most sophisticated customers, we found many folks with similar growing pains. This research ended up driving some of the biggest items in our roadmap this year. This chart is from our anonymous usage statistics. It shows the distribution of DBT project sizes. When we initially launched DBT into the world, 150 models was a large project. Fast forward 2 or 3 years, and it was 500 models. Today, a large project is 1,000 models, and 5% of you are working in projects with 5,000 or more models. The size of the code base isn't in and of itself a problem. After all, software engineers have been working in larger and larger code bases for many decades. The problem isn't lines of code, it's complexity. The question then is, how do we flatten this line? How do we continue to build our DBT investments while not having complexity spiral out of control? Software engineers have tools to do just this. With the right software architecture, more mature systems are actually easier to work with, not harder. They have great APIs, great documentation, and a great developer experience. But this time last year, DBT didn't have any of these things. And without them, we consistently see complexity drive user pain, lower quality, lower speed, user frustration. The complexity tax has become a real pain for DBT's most advanced users. I believe that the solution to this problem comes from the same place that all of DBT's best ideas come from: stealing from software engineers. Okay, so we spent the past year talking to customers about the question, and like any big problem, as soon as we got people talking, the dam broke. Almost every data leader we spoke to in the past year wants to enable individual teams to own their own data products. And so we got to work. Our goals: enabling small teams of 5 to 9 developers who could own their own code all the way through production, exposing interfaces to other trusted teams to build on top of, and the entire system has to be visible and governable. We've got, we spent most of the year on this, and we have come to refer to it as DBT Mesh. DBT Mesh is a way of architecting your DBT DAG and workflows to enable greater decentralization and greater ownership while not losing visibility or control. DBT Mesh isn't a single feature or a set of features. It borrows ideas from, but is not the same thing as the data mesh. All right, so we've covered a lot here, from history to our company priorities to why we need to move towards distributed and empowered teams. I'm excited about this future for analytics engineering, and I hope you are as well. Now, I'd like to invite Sai Maddali to tell us a little bit more about the DBT Mesh. Sai is a product manager at DBT Labs. He has a deep background in identity and auth, the pillars of governance and scaling teams. His work at Okta brought us, among other things, FastPass and its Chrome plugin, which has become a seamless part of my work life. Sai, come on up.
Thank you. Thank you, Heidi. Wow, that's a lot of you here, and it's so good to see everyone here. My name is Sai Maddali, and I'm the product lead for enterprise and infrastructure products at DBT Labs. Coalesce is one of my favorite conferences, actually maybe the favorite conference. I'm a little biased, just a little bit. So much of what we focus this past year at DBT has been about how do we help solve complexity. Now, complexity can mean a lot of things, but something that drives me and a lot of my peers at DBT Labs is how do we build the right experiences to make sure that a lot of the complexity that Heidi just talked about is solved with really good experiences. Now, that complexity can be very different depending on where you are in your maturity with DBT. One of the things that we see is maybe you start your DBT journey with a set of models. But as you add more use cases, more developers, maybe like tens of models turn into hundreds of models. You keep adding things, hundreds of models then turn into thousands of models. You add more developers, and things get really cumbersome at this scale. So much of the work that we've done this past year is how do we help you take something as large as this, break it down, make it significantly more manageable. Because complexity like this has a lot of costs with it. You start seeing a lot of data discrepancy issues. Trust becomes really hard. If you're a developer, writing code becomes really inefficient. And there's also a lot of other workflow bottlenecks that you're dealing with. And all this means there's increased operational costs, whether that's actual dollars that you're putting behind this or other hidden costs. So now, for the rest of this presentation, we're going to take a look at how we're solving this complexity at different layers of the organization, starting with the developer, team, and the organization. Let's start with developers. So if you're a developer, or you work with developers, your workflow might look something like this. You write code, you test it, you deploy it, you monitor it, you restart it all over again. It's probably not as straightforward as this, though. There's probably a lot of inefficiencies and problems that you see at different stages of this. But two things for us on the product team that we really think about is developer flow and CI/CD that actually scales and works with you, at least this past year. Developer flow is a term that we use a lot on the product team, which is if you're a developer, you're writing code, how do we help you stay in a flow state? So you're doing what you're supposed to do, which is write code, deploy it, test it, and stay in that zone. The second one is we've also heard a lot of great feedback about the current limitations of the CI system. And that's the other place that we focused a lot on. Foundational to DBT developer experience is DBT Core, our open source tool that we've started a couple of years ago that really gave birth to the analytics engineering movement. So many of you have been loyal and shown us so much great support over the years with DBT Core, and we're so grateful and so humbled by all that support. And like Heidi mentioned, we are so committed to keeping DBT Core open source via the Apache 2.0 license. Now, this past year, we've seen a lot of big releases with DBT Core. The first big one is DBT Core 1.6, which is a major version. There's been a few important things that came out. First is model governance, which I'll talk about later. But along with a bunch of other things, we had support for materialized views, retry from point of failure, model cloning. We've also made over 100 fixes, including improved error messages, warning messages for significantly better troubleshooting. We've also made a lot of under-the-hood improvements. These are things that you may not see, but they have significant performance improvements and a lot of code velocity improvements so that we can ship things faster. Now, we built Core, and after that, a lot of our customers and users in the community talked about, give me an easy way to deploy DBT. That's when we built DBT Cloud. Now, DBT Cloud has a lot of great things about it. The first is a cloud-based IDE that'll help you onboard your users really quickly into DBT, especially if they're not comfortable using command line tools. The second is we have a CI product. We also have an orchestration product and a way to monitor the health and status of your DBT jobs. and a way to discover everything in your dbt DAG with dbt docs. Let's talk about what we're doing here. First, let's start with CI. One of the first things we did this past year is templated jobs. Before, you could create a dbt job, but they were too generic. And what this allowed our customers to do is make mistakes. But now we've separated them out into templated jobs for deploy job and a CI job with smart, opinionated defaults. This will make sure you're always getting dbt recommended best practices. With that, we've added a few more things on top of it. First is auto cancellation of in-flight jobs. Let's say you do a PR. That kicks off a dbt job, dbt run. But you notice that, hey, you need to make a couple of changes to it. Before, we never canceled the old job after you made that PR. Now we cancel it in favor of the new one. It saves you time, it saves you money. If you're a dev or a team plan customer, you can ensure that your CI runs don't count against your run slots. The next one is deferral to an environment. Deferral is change awareness. How do you compare the latest run to something that you're currently running? It ensures that when you run a model, you don't need to run unnecessary things upstream, other models. So we always compare it to the most recent production state of your production environment. The next one is retry from point of failure. Before, if you did a dbt run and it failed for whatever reason, and you made those changes and you kicked off the dbt run again, it would start from all the way from the top. But with retry from point of failure, we've fixed that. If you make mistakes and you do a dbt run and that fails, you can go fix it, and we pick it up with the context from the last point it failed. Let's talk about the IDE. I use the IDE a lot, and one of the things that's a little annoying about it is you need to do dbt deps every single time. dbt deps is a way to initialize all your dependencies and manage your dependencies. Well, I'm really excited to say with dbt core 1.7, you don't need to do that because we completely manage all the dependencies for you. We've also released SQL linting and formatting into the IDE, so you can always make sure that your SQL code is up to standards. I've also talked about defer to production earlier with CI, but you can also do that within the IDE, so that every time you do a dbt build, dbt run, we're comparing it with the latest production state. Now, a lot of you in the audience may be, Sai, I don't use the IDE, what about me? Well, that is a really good question. For the last year, even before that, we've been talking to so many customers, and so many of you have asked for, hey, I actually prefer, and I want to continue using the CLI, but I also want to use cloud. What do I do? What indeed? Well, we spent the last year building this, and I'm really excited to announce that we now have a dbt Cloud CLI. dbt Cloud CLI, the way it works is it helps you preserve the same development experience that you're used to with dbt core on the CLI with your favorite tools. Whether you prefer VS Code, maybe you prefer Vim or Emacs, I don't know. You can continue using this, but with the power of cloud. And the way it works, you download the executable, DMG, brew install it, and you do dbt Cloud login. That redirects you to the browser. You authenticate with your SSO provider, you come back to cloud, and you continue working the same exact way that you've been used to. But all your credentials, your environment variables can all be managed in the cloud. More than that, you don't have to worry about any Python dependencies, worry about upgrading core every single time. It's super powerful and a lot of fun to use. More importantly, this isn't just a concept. It's not in alpha, it's not in beta. It's actually available for you today. So go around, play with it, give us feedback. Now we talked about the developer. Let's move up to the teams. With teams, it's not just about a single developer anymore. It's about people and how people work with each other. And there's really probably two main things that are really important in this context. The first is how do you create shared data knowledge so that everyone has the same context? And the second one is how do you make sure that there's no redundant code that's being built? How do you make sure there's reusable building blocks? And historically, this has been a problem that we've been focused on. We built dbt docs years ago. It's still one of the more popular features of dbt. And a lot of customers in cloud also use this feature. It helps you properly visualize your DAG, search any node, do all kinds of interesting things. But we've also heard a lot of things about dbt docs where it's not up to par. It's slow, it's cumbersome, it gets really hard to use as your project grows. So we've been hard at work, again, on fixing this. We've talked to a lot of customers. We also use it internally, and we also ran into problems. So we spent a lot of time, and I'm really excited to announce the evolution of this, which is dbt Explorer. dbt Explorer is a way of discovering everything about your dbt DAG and sharing it. It has a few key things. A significantly better search experience that's blazing fast. It shows all your metadata context about your entire dbt DAG and all the nodes dynamically and quickly. And it also has a really snappy, performant DAG visualizer. Now, Explorer is a very visual product. Let's take a look at a proper demo. So this right here is a landing page of dbt Explorer. And let's say I want to make changes to an existing model, orders, fact orders in this case. I can go take a look at the lineage, all the metadata about it, take a look at the code and the schema, the columns, and maybe I want to dig into the tests of a specific column. Similarly, if I want to take a look at the exposures and how this model is being used, I can take a look at the data freshness and data quality downstream. Similarly, you may be using the semantic layer to define specific metrics based off of this model. And to cap it all off, we have this really snappy and performant DAG visualizer that's really easy to use and a lot more contextual than dbt docs. Similarly to the Cloud CLI, the Explorer also is not just a concept. This is available for you today if you're an enterprise customer. Now, the Explorer is really great for a lot of data practitioners. And it's built to help you collaborate amongst each other. But a lot of what you build is also for the data consumers in your organizations. Before joining dbt, one of the most annoying things to deal with data as a data consumer was thinking about a metric like revenue, wanting to build a report, and going to my counterpart, perhaps in finance, and us both having two different numbers. And that was really annoying to deal with because now you had to have 3 separate meetings, talking to each other, going and talking to the data team, figuring out, hey, why is this metric actually wrong? That was really painful. And probably a lot of you face it too. This is why we built dbt semantic layer, and we announced it last year at Coalesce. Earlier this year, we also acquired a company, Transform. Transform built this open source tool called Metricflow, and Metricflow is an advanced query generator. And we spent the last 8 months integrating Metricflow with dbt semantic layer, and let's talk about what that looks like. Actually, before I go in, if you don't know what semantic layer is a way to properly and consistently define business metrics. So that regardless of where your user is, whether they're a business user in Tableau, a technical user in Hex, financial analyst in Google Sheets, they all have the same exact metrics pulling from the same exact definitions in dbt. So with Metricflow, we made a few key changes. The first is support for dynamic joins. How does this work? Let's say I'm a data analyst. I'm looking at this transactions table. I'm looking at revenue per customer. But perhaps I also want to dig into, hey, I want to look at revenue by product category. With dynamic joins, there's no need for pre-aggregated data. Metricflow automatically figures out, based on your semantic model, of how to pull this data in real time dynamically by generating that query. It's super powerful. The second one is complex metric types. Semantic layer always had metric types. We're just introducing a lot more, like cumulative metrics, ratio metrics, et cetera. And Metricflow also generates really powerful and legible SQL for you, just like your best data practitioners would. We also have expanded API support with a strongly typed GraphQL API and a JDBC driver through Apache Arrow. So if you're building an internal app, or whether you're a partner in the audience that wants to integrate with semantic layer, there's 2 different ways of doing that. Now, we're so thankful to our ecosystem of partners in helping this a reality. Google Sheets, Hex, Clipfolio, Lightdash, Mode, Push, Tableau. But this is also supported across all the data platforms that are on dbt Cloud today: Redshift, Databricks, BigQuery, Snowflake. Let's take a look at a demo. Now, we start off on Tableau desktop. Here on the left, I have a server connection to dbt semantic layer. I connect to the endpoint through a service token from dbt cloud. And I go into Tableau worksheet. Everything on the left you see here are the actual dimensions, measures, and metrics that are defined in dbt semantic layer. Maybe I want to take a look at the revenue metric on the yearly time grain. I can also dig in specifically into various different time grains that are all defined in your YAML in semantic layer. I can also do advanced filters, like maybe I want to create top revenue by customers. And what's cool about this is all of this is being dynamically generated in real time as it's being sent to semantic layer. Now, whether I'm a business user in Tableau, another user in Hex, another user in Financial Analyst, we're all getting the same data, the same exact metric, regardless of where this is being used. Cool. I'm also excited to say that all of what you see here with semantic layer, just like with Explorer and the CLI, is currently in GA. OK, we talked about teams. Let's talk about the organization. At the organization level, it's not just about a single developer, groups of developers. It's really about everyone together. How do you collaborate across teams and across multiple people? Now, your dbt project may look something similar to this, which is you have one giant project or one small project with a set of models. But like we talked about, over time, with more dbt usage, things will get really complex. And we see this time over time. And a single project may be pretty good because it's straightforward. Everything's in a single place. You have a single DAG to manage. But as it gets big, even small changes gets really annoying and really hard to deal with. Because let's say you want to make a change to a single model. Now you have to worry about everything downstream and how it affects them. And you have to go talk to them. And you have to figure out, hey, how is this actually going to affect you? Similarly, if someone makes a change upstream, you also have to deal with that. Now, in a limited context, this might be OK. But at scale, this gets really hard because there's real costs to this, whether it's cognitive load, costs, time, whatever it may be. So we've been hard at work figuring out how to solve this specific problem, especially when you have thousands and thousands of models. Again, regardless of how small your dbt deployment is, it will get there. And that's where Heidi talked about dbt mesh. So dbt mesh is a design construct. It's an architectural pattern. It's not a collection of features. And we borrowed a lot of concepts from data mesh and service-oriented architecture in software engineering. And it really has a few main concepts to it. The first is multiple projects for modularity. How do you take something giant and monolithic and break it down into composable modular chunks? Perhaps you have one giant project today. How do you break that apart into your data domains, functional data domains, finance, revenue, marketing? Now, before in a single project, it was easy to collaborate-ish between different projects because you're able to reference them. Now, how do you collaborate across multiple different data domains and functional projects like this? This is where we've introduced cross-project ref. Now, you may be familiar with the ref function that exists in dbt today, which allows you to reference models within a given project. With cross-project ref, you're able to reference models across projects. Extremely powerful. Now that you're able to reference models across projects, how do you ensure consistency? How do you ensure breaking changes are not introduced? And I kind of hinted at model governance earlier. That's where we introduced model governance. This has three main concepts to it. First is model contracts. And model contracts work very similarly to API contracts today, where if you built an API, you always expect a consistent and accurate result. And that's the same thing with model contracts. You can enforce a specific schema and make sure that doesn't break. The second is model versioning. Just like APIs and how there's a version, models can now have a version. So let's say you want to introduce some breaking changes. You can version that model to be a v2. And the third one is access levels. You can make models private or public. Private models are only visible to users within a given project. Public models are available to anyone. And it's a great way to introduce changes that may be breaking. or you may be working on something that you don't want people to see. All right, that's a lot of concepts that I just gave, but maybe let's take a look at a proper demo. And it's by Jerko, who's Jeremy Cohen. Some of you may know him. He's not here, but he recorded a great demo for us.
I'm going to show you how a set of developers can collaborate across multiple projects in the DBT mesh pattern. As always, I'll be illustrating these concepts and workflows using our favorite fictional business, the Jaffle Shop, now enterprise scale and factored into 3 separate projects: platform, finance, and marketing. This cross-project lineage that you're seeing, each arrow represents a model reference across projects. We'll be taking a look at cross-project refs very soon. You'll notice some of these are public models shared with other projects, while others can be private or protected. These public models are the mature, reusable assets that enable dataset sharing with downstream teams. Those other models, the implementation details for one team, modularity within each, clarity across all. We have this orders model, which is public and has a contract enforced. What does this mean in practice? Let's put on the hat of the finance team, pop it open in the IDE, and develop in this model. I know there are other teams depending on the structure of orders. If I were to take away a column or change its data type, or even add another column that's unexpected, when I go to build it, I'm going to see a model contract error at build time. The contents of this model no longer match up with the explicitly defined contract. The goal: clear expectations for downstream consumers, without risk of surprise or breaking changes. I find out in development and in CI, not in production, when I've incidentally broken someone else's dashboard. Of course, if I do need to make a backwards incompatible change to this model's structure, I can create a new model version, like a new version of an API, and mark the old version for deprecation. Model governance by DBT within DBT throughout its development lifecycle. No other tools necessary. Let's stay in the finance team's project, taking off the producer hat and putting on the hat of a data consumer. In this case, consuming those public models available from the platform team's project. I don't need to build from scratch. I can leverage this work of the other team, who have already prepared for me models like stage products, which have a contract defined with a set of columns that I can rely on. I can use these models as my jumping off point, calling them as APIs. Let's go back to the IDE, this time going to the order items model. Here are my cross-project references, project name and model name. You can see that the dependencies are tracked, that I'm able to compile this model, and that these refs will compile to the production location of these upstream public models. We can even preview this data, and it all just works. Now I can resolve these cross-project references because I'm using DBT Cloud as my development platform. What about teams with hybrid development, where some data engineers or more technical analysts prefer to develop on the command line? As we saw earlier, I can leverage the DBT Cloud CLI to use cloud as my development platform even while developing locally in VS Code. Here I have the same order items model open as before. There's also a downstream model orders that depends on it. If I were to add the same filter, leveraging the product types model in the upstream public model, which I know I can trust because it has a contract, I edit it, I compile it, I can go and build it. This is going to build my order items model and also orders. If you are really paying attention, you'll have noticed that I'm skipping over all other upstream models, in other projects as well as in this one. Through a mix of cross-project ref and automatic deferral, it all just works. Finally, once I'm happy with the models I've developed and I'm ready to deploy, I want a way to guarantee that this finance project's models always run after the upstream platform team's models. Now I'm going to show you a sneak preview of functionality coming very soon. Within DBT Cloud's easy-to-use orchestrator, I have a wicked simple built-in way to trigger this job when the upstream project's job completes. That's it. Coming soon to a DBT Cloud near you.
I definitely could not have done a good job as Jerko with the demo. One of the things that we hinted at in that demo was job completion triggers. this is going to be one of the things that we build soon, where you can take a dependency on an upstream project or a job to finish before you can start yours. A very key fundamental concept in dbt mesh. Now, I've talked about a few different concepts, and you saw the demo, but one of the interesting things about this is we've built dbt Explorer and dbt Cloud CLI with dbt mesh in mind, so that they can all work together, because data discovery is very fundamental to a model like this. More importantly, we also need to make sure that regardless of what your preferred way of writing code, whether it's a CLI, whether it's the IDE, you have the options to do so with both the Cloud CLI and the IDE. Now, similar to all the other things I've talked about, dbt mesh isn't also just something of a concept. It's being used by real customers, some of the world's largest organizations and the most complex dbt projects. Here's Mark at Fifth Third Banks, one of the largest financial services organizations in the United States. We also have one of our beloved customers in Europe, Siemens, that's been piloting this. As a matter of fact, we actually have a session later today where the team from Siemens will talk about how they're using dbt mesh in their data platform. We strongly believe that dbt mesh significantly amplifies cross-team collaboration. And that's across a few different vectors. Creating shared data knowledge for everyone, so everyone has the same context. The second is governed interfaces and reusable building blocks to make sure that you have consistent and predictable results without writing redundant code. And the third is decentralized deployments to remove or reduce workflow bottlenecks that you're going to inevitably have. All of these features are available for you to use today. Job completion triggers for orchestration will be available relatively soon. But before we leave, one last thing. I know a lot of you here use Microsoft Azure products, including Synapse and Fabric. I'm really excited to say we're also soon going to have support for this in dbt Cloud. With that, thank you so much for your time, attention, and energy. Please stop us and give us feedback. We cannot wait to hear all of that. Thank you for your time. Don't be shy. Come say hi. Thanks.